Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, one of the key trends that I'm seeing in all the emails that you guys are sending me at the moment is people saying that they've been working differently for several months and now want their business to continue that momentum by working differently and increasing productivity, build on it and explore new ways of working and learn about how they can do all that by leveraging technology. So, I cast my podcasting net far and wide across the globe to find someone that was passionate about this subject and also working with the technology that is changing things. But most importantly, someone who has the ear of many organisations around the world and hear more about the kind of conversations that every business is having right now. And that search took me to Andrew Gross from Crestron, which is one of the world's leading innovator and advanced control automation systems for the office, campus, and even luxury homes. And their tagline is simply reinventing how people live and work. So with all that in mind, I invited him on the podcast today to discuss the types of technology that will support a safe yet collaborative return to the offices following the pandemic, and much more. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears to the New Jersey area of the US so we can speak with Andrew now. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Andrew. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Neil. Yes, I'm Andrew Gross. I run our UC business here at Crestron Electronics. What UC means really to Crestron is anything that involves Microsoft Teams, Zoom rooms, all that video conferencing stuff that every company is looking for to involve virtual conferencing. And Crestron as a company, maybe for those that aren't too familiar with that name, we've been around for better part of half a century making audio-visual technology. Really what we did was we took signals from laptops and different cable boxes and security cameras, and we sent them different places around your enterprise or around your home. And just recently, we've certainly taken that expertise in audio and visual and have applied it to our unified communication business and strengthened that partnership with Microsoft and Zoom when the Teams and Zoom room world really has started to boom.
And that's one of the reasons I'm excited to get you on the podcast today, because I know it's hard to believe. Only 6 months ago, we were excited to be part of a new year, a new decade, and so much opportunities. And we'd go into an office and that same old boring looking meeting room. But of course, now everything's completely changed. And as people around the world begin their collaborative return to offices following the pandemic, I've got to ask, how much has office life changed and how are businesses adapting? And by that, because you do serve a lot of big name businesses, brands and companies all over the world. So from the conversations you're having, how are businesses adapting right now?
It's a question I probably get from, I think, every single customer I speak to. And in our company, the hardware that we manufacture, we're inside of the offices of 95+% of the Fortune 100 and 95+% of large universities around the globe. So we do have these conversations very, very frequently. It is different, but I think I'd say it's not as different as I think we all think it is. And one of the reasons I say that, I'm taking and speaking to you today from the office, right? And I'm in my office, I'm using my computer, I'm collaborating with different employees. And the way that we're meeting with people and the way that we're interacting with other folks within the office, yes, it is certainly different. You wear masks, you separate from each other. The way that a lot of these Fortune 100 companies are also adopting and changing work-life balance, especially in the office, is how the spaces are being utilized. So we had, of course, conference rooms and huddle rooms all around the floor plate, and they all had 6 chairs or 8 chairs or 10 chairs inside of them. And so one of the big things changing there that I think everybody notices when returning to the office is the majority of these shared office spaces are being reduced in half in regards to their capacity. And the sort of policing of that reduced capacity has become very important to these large organizations. And that's true for universities too, regarding classrooms. For those that are bringing students back, is a 20-person classroom is now more likely a 10-person classroom. And so, how are we ensuring that we can still efficiently meet in these offices is being discussed and being really decided upon how technology can help that. B, how are we policing the fact that we say that this room is only capable of handling 10 people now? How are we ensuring that social distancing is being implemented and that room is really being used by 10 people? And then the third one is kind of a response to the result of all of this is how are we supporting the hybrid work environment? And what I mean by hybrid is these companies realize that, yes, not everybody's going to work from home forever. And yes, not everybody's going to come back to the office like they did just 6 months ago. And so that hybrid environment of a certain percentage working from home interacting with a certain percentage working from the office is absolutely the biggest question. And the way that they're adopting it is implementing video conferencing technology, the ability to have that type of interaction and meeting and communication between people both in the office and those at home is by far the most important thing that these large organizations are doing today.
And before we started recording the podcast today, we were having just a bit of a chat around how when we're walking around a city or anywhere now, we automatically wear the masks, hand sanitizers are everywhere, we're mindful of our distance and thoughtful of others. So, of course, when we're going to the office, that requires a different mindset. And like you said a few moments ago, a kind of policing of that office space. So one of the things that I read about recently was occupancy sensors to ensure that new capacity limits are just not exceeded in meeting rooms. So can you tell me a little bit more about that tech and how it works?
Sure thing. So there's a couple different ways to do what we call motion sensing. So you have your more macro level, which is really that occupancy detection. And I call it macro mainly because you're simply identifying, is there somebody in this room, right? That could be one person or it could be 10 people, but is the room occupied? The technology around that sort of indication is typically used with passive infrared technology or ultrasonic technology is a big one as well. And so that technology just identifies, is the room occupied or is the room vacant? The real new one that started to pop up, and I say new not because the technology is so new, but really it's new being implemented, is part of that occupancy detection, but it's called people counting. And these people counting sensors, they use a little bit different technology. There's a couple different providers that use everything from active infrared. They use facial detection. They'll use sort of body image detection as well, or even a sensor at a doorway that'll simply count vectors of people walking in versus people walking out. And they add them up to determine how many people are in that office space. But this people counting has really started to replace the occupancy because the need to know how many people are in a specific room is much more valuable to HR, to facilities, and to IT than it is just simply knowing, is my room occupied or vacant? And so that type of technology, not only is it being used to gather the information of how many people are using this room, but it's also kind of going back to what we just talked about, using to enforce the rules. And now HR, facilities, and IT may be receiving alerts that if I've identified this specific room is a 5-person conference room now due to social distancing, if it goes above 5, an email alert is sent out based upon the different technology used and sent out to IT, HR, facilities to let them know that, hey, social distancing may not be actually abided by the people in this specific conference room. And then they can send a message or potentially even shut down the technology in that room.
And I also read that automated meeting start technology that forgoes the need to touch AV equipment by detecting people and just starts the meeting automatically. Now, as someone that still gets IT flashbacks of walking in a full boardroom to resolve AV tech issues, this sounds fantastic. So can you expand on how you're eradicating that dreaded meeting room tech issue that I think everybody listening would have encountered at some stage?
Yeah, so there's a couple things there too. The first one regarding automated meeting start. It is very platform dependent. And when I say platform, I mean, are you using Microsoft Teams? Are you using Zoom? Are you using Google Hangouts? those platforms of engaging virtually in that virtual meeting room, they typically determine how you're going to be able to have a no-touch meeting in the space. The hardware that, say, my company Crestron provides in that space for Teams rooms and Zoom rooms, we're sort of the medium or the facilitator of this technology. And then dependent on Teams or Zoom, what technology maybe they have built into the platform allows for automated meeting start. But an important thing there is what you don't want is, for anyone to be able to just simply start any meeting just because, say, occupancy was detected. So the real focus is actually personal device control and personal device touch. And being able to, say, walk into a meeting space, open up the Teams app on your phone, and then start the meeting in the room from your own personal device so that it is known that it's this person starting this specific meeting. That's been a very big trend, and we're going to be seeing a lot of announcements from Teams and Zoom and some other partners that allow for that type of control and interaction. So we remove maybe the communal touch-based device. The second thing here, though, is also about support, right? You mentioned your flashbacks of walking into that boardroom and nothing works. I tell you, I have the same nightmares. I've been at Crestron for almost a decade now, so I've certainly experienced my fair share of large, $200,000 meeting room technologies, and nothing works. And I've got to go in there and help fix it back in my early days. But there's today there's a couple big things that are happening with this new video conferencing technology with Teams rooms and Zoom rooms. Is one, they're simpler, right? I think that's actually a great thing that we're seeing is these large video conference spaces are actually being boiled down to, say, a meeting room system that puts a device on the table, a camera at the front of the room, and maybe some mic pods down the length of the table itself. And that's it. And that provides you enough technology to get a meeting up and running virtually, but both for the people in the space and, of course, those remotely in those quote unquote remote rooms. But it's about managing that system. Even though it's simpler, we all know that something is always going to go wrong, whether it's a network connection, power outage, or even just user error a lot of the times can occur with these systems. So the big thing, and this is something that even Crestron is focused on, is about remote support and remote control. It's been an awesome introduction for all of these systems because not only pre-pandemic, as it does now help quell my fears of walking into that executive room and having to fix something, I now can actually remotely take over a lot of these virtual conferencing systems and not just take over the system, but physically see and screen scrape what is on the touch panel in that room, and then take control and walk through the people in the room completely remotely to fix the problem in that space. Now, of course, during this pandemic and post-pandemic, that has so much more meaning because it doesn't just help the IT manager fix things quicker and, of course, fix things probably a little bit nicer considering they don't have to go there in person, but it also keeps them safer. It removes the unnecessary human-to-human interaction that maybe that IT manager previously had to have because everything can do remote. So yes, everything's getting simpler. Yes, things will always go wrong. So being able to take control, see, manage, and rectify pretty much all your technology throughout your space, especially now where we're putting even more technology throughout the enterprise, is so important.
And something else I also remember clearly was typically in a lot of organizations, they have a handful of oversized meeting rooms that are booked out for weeks in advance. And of course, not everybody moves into a meeting room now. There's going to be people scattered all over. So sometimes I think we just want an impromptu meeting with somewhere quiet with maybe a video chat with a remote worker, for example. So if we dare to think outside of the traditional meeting room, can you tell me a little bit more about the easily transportable rolling conference room equipment that can turn almost any space or area into a meeting room, and also, of course, tick the box on social distancing too?
This was an interesting project that Crestron undertook, actually during the pandemic. I mean, we fully conceived, designed, developed, built, and shipped all from the time frame of end of March to end of May, all during when the pandemic really took hold of the United States. To answer this exact question, Neil, that you bring up is the fact that we needed something to provide to our customers that allowed them not only to turn non-traditional spaces into meeting spaces because they were larger, helped to abide by social distancing rules, but also to allow them to do this faster. And that was a big thing that we were looking to solve. Was our customers, both existing and new, were looking to Crestron as technology providers to them for, say, better part of 50 years, to say, hey, what can you provide me that's quick and simple to deploy now? Because I need to keep my business running. I need to be able to still have people in the office, essential workers at many of our customers, that need to be able to meet now remotely with other folks around the world that previously they would either go in person or bring them into the office to now need to be done virtually. And so this actually introduced what we called it our R series, R for rapid. And it was a new piece of technology that we took a lot of our existing video conferencing equipment that was traditionally permanently installed inside of conference rooms or huddle spaces. And what we did was we integrated it into a rolling cart with a giant screen and all of the technology, audio, video built into that one device. And this now allowed them, first, the big thing was to quickly and rapidly take technology, video conferencing equipment, Teams rooms, Zoom rooms from Crestron, and bring it wherever it was necessary. But it also allowed them to now turn these larger areas into meeting spaces, right? Think spaces like lobbies or cafeterias. We even saw hallways starting to turn more and more into meeting areas because it was the only way to get a large group of people to abide by that social distancing law. And, in the beginning of this conversation, we talked about how a lot of meeting rooms were being cut in half. Well, that's great. And we understand how that's okay because we can still, if I had a 5-person meeting, I can go to that previous 10-person conference room and have that meeting. But nobody has 40-person conference rooms to help support that 20-person meeting. And so that full reduction in half of these meeting rooms caused a lot of problems. And the only spaces in these enterprises or these large universities that allowed for that number of people to meet were more of their common areas. And a permanent installation of video conferencing equipment didn't quite fit. So this new R Series Flex Cart is what we call it, does allow for you to bring in Teams rooms, bring in Zoom rooms, wherever you need it, at really the drop of a hat, because it is on that rolling cart. So it was a great piece of technology that was completely conceived and shipped all during the pandemic to answer these customers' needs.
And I also think that it's been a few years now, but IT departments have finally accepted that saying no to bring your own devices is just not a realistic anymore. Pandora is officially out of the box. So with that in mind, can you tell me a bit more about how you offer the ability to control meetings and share presentations and content from a personal device without the need to touch shared conference room equipment that they might not be too familiar with? Because again, that is a big moment, isn't it? Because you're much more comfortable with your own devices.
Oh, of course. We see it as BYOD is back. I mean, this was something that Crestron embraced 4 years ago, and it was an ideology of our first product called Crestron Mercury, which was all about BYOD, bring your own device. And those 4 years ago when we first launched the device, it was about the ubiquity of any platform you choose, bring and plug in, and now you can meet. But what happened over the last 2 years was sort of this native revolution, right? We saw Microsoft Teams and Zoom start to truly boom in the workplace and in the educational space of no longer do you need to bring your laptop, deploy a device, deploy a platform, and you now have one touch to join on that specific device in all rooms at all times. And like you said, IT departments loved it because now it was a single platform, a single piece of technology that was able to be managed, but also, of course, able to be secured. And I think that was really the big thing was we wanted to ensure that all this communication was secured through a specific platform. And that native revolution kind of handheld IT departments through that. But of course, now what we're seeing is, and this is actually even pre-pandemic, was that shift back a little bit, or at least the reopening of acceptance to BYOD. And we're seeing it for two main reasons. The first one, what we called it was an addressing of the 80-20 rule, was that the majority of organizations, I'm sure everybody can relate, I know Crestron can relate to this ourselves, you find a platform and you chose to standardize on it, right? We chose Microsoft Teams. Everyone within Crestron utilizes Microsoft Teams to interact amongst colleagues, all internal communication. That's 80% of our meetings. Yeah. But the other 20% is, well, what about our sales teams? And what about our HR teams who need to meet with prospects or meet with potential hires or other vendors who don't use Microsoft Teams? Do I now need to use a different conference room or a different huddle space because that was a Microsoft Teams room, but now I need to go to a different room that maybe supports Zoom or maybe supports Google Hangouts? And that became a problem for user adoption, right? Because now IT departments had to set up different rooms, manage different tech pieces of technology in all those rooms, but also the user adoption declined because they now had to memorize which rooms had which technology. So one of the things that Crestron actually did to address this was just in May, we introduced really the first technology and the only one out there today that is both BYOD and native, all built into one device. It's called our MX solution. And it addressed that need in the fact that you can now take one piece of technology and deploy it into all the rooms. And you had native Microsoft Teams for that 80% case scenario. But if you did need to have a Zoom meeting or you had to have a Google Hangouts meeting, you could bring your laptop. And when you plug and you play, it overrides the Microsoft Teams native platform, and your BYOD Zoom room or Hangouts run on your laptop overtakes the audio and the video in the space. So that was a huge introduction, pre and kind of current pandemic. But now what we're seeing is BYOD, to what your point, Neil, is becoming so much more important, not because of functionality, but actually just because of comfort level. People want to be able to touch their own device, use their own device for sanitary purposes, for familiarity purposes, because that's what they've been doing for the last 6 months. And so this now has a whole new meaning of BYOD plus native in this, what we're calling our X line of products. And it's not just for the flexibility between platforms, but it's also to ensure that the customers using the devices and using the technology feel a lot more comfortable using their own, bring your own device.
And you made a great point there about people want to touch their own device, because I think we are so much more mindful about everything that we touch now. And you see it everywhere you go. You see people going up an escalator or on the metro. Nobody's holding handrails anymore, and they're using their arms to open doors, etc. So I'm also intrigued to find out that you also have room scheduling and room signage where employees no longer need to touch and open the door to see if the room is occupied. So can you tell me a little bit more about that too?
Yeah, they're pretty simple solutions, and they've been around for a while, but boy, they're super powerful. And I think that's probably the big thing. And these solutions that I'm talking about it's our scheduling panel or our scheduling system line from Crestron. What it does is it puts that, a touch panel that you may be familiar with using on the inside of the room, but it puts it now on the outside of the space. And it doesn't just have a touch interface to show you what is going on in that meeting room, but it now, and currently more importantly in these times, it has visual indicators. And so that touch panel, in addition to it being able to be interacted with and shown, this is the meeting schedule for the day, this is the calendar, you can also ad hoc meeting directly by walking up to the Crestron scheduling panel. Those indicators have been very important now, because now I can look down a hallway and I can see from the side of that scheduling panel, based upon the LED indicators on the side of the panel, or now even we offer a device that sits externally from the touch panel, and it'll sit above on the wall or above on the ceiling. That's a nice large, we call light bar, that'll indicate that status of the room, both occupied or vacant, much clearer. And it's a bright green or red or blue sign. It'll tell me the name of that conference room. And everything is becoming a lot more visual. But in addition to the visual indicators, another thing that we've started to add and roll out as a new piece of technology is the way that those visual indicators are actually activated. So to give you an example, typically green means that it is vacant. I can walk in there and use the space. A red light means that it's occupied and you shouldn't unnecessarily touch the door or walk in and potentially interact with people unnecessarily. But the new piece of technology that we have is connecting those indicators to a motion sensor. And so that motion sensor that we previously spoke about, where it's very macro, just tells me if people are in the room or not in the room, is going to communicate its status back to those panels. So I don't have to touch the panel to say, I'm using this room. I now can walk into a green room. That motion sensor senses a body is in the space, and it automatically sends a message back to that panel, turns it red. So again, nobody else is going to walk in that space unnecessarily or unnecessarily touch any of the panels to make a reservation because you've done it all through motion and no touch.
I love that. And I'm going to ask you to dare you to gaze into your virtual crystal ball now. So can I ask that you share a vision of what the average day might look like in an office 2 years from now? Because I do suspect it's going to be very different from what we had 3 months ago, what we've got now. It feels like we're on a journey somewhere else. Is there anything that you can offer on that from the kind of conversations you're having and the technology you're working with?
Absolutely. It certainly will be different. I'd say probably my first disclaimer to all of this is I don't believe it's going to be truly as crazily different as we all think it's going to be. Yeah. You know, we are going to return to the office in some capacity. Will the office be somewhat different than it was in February when we left it? Of course it will be. But it's not going to be this wild future that I think a lot of people are conjuring up in their thoughts of getting back to the office and we're all in our little bubbles. That's not going to be the case. And I say this not just on my own vision. I say this from, of course, speaking to the majority of the Fortune 100 and large universities around the globe and collecting feedback on what their vision is and speaking with large architectural firms and large analyst firms on what their vision of the future office will be and how it works for the worker. And so what I've kind of put together is, you know, it's going to be less office space, right? Less cubicles. And the office spaces are going to be more focused around collaboration. And that may seem counterintuitive, right? Well, okay, you're saying now that the office is going to have more people interacting with each other? Well, yes. And the reason why is because that's going to be one of your only impetuses to come to the office. If you need to answer emails, if you need to take phone calls all day, you're going to do that at home. That's going to be your work from anywhere day, because you can do that now with the technology that people are deploying or from your own laptop, and you can stay at home, no reason to come to the office for those types of personal interactions. If you are going to collaborate, if you're going to have a meeting, if you need to work on a group project, that's going to be the time that you do come to the office, and it's going to be done safely. And that's the key thing, right? Where social distancing is still going to be around, masks are still going to be around for at least the near future. But as vaccines start to come out, you know, we're going to have a much more comfort level or higher comfort level of working with other people. You know, humans are social creatures. There's no denying that. We're going to get more done and feel more involved in a group and a corporate culture when we are working together. And so that's going to be the time that you do come to the office. The other big thing that we're going to see in these offices is what we call our video conferencing inversion. What we saw was pre-pandemic, around 15% of all addressable rooms. That means huddle rooms all the way up to large auditorium type spaces. 15 to 20% of those rooms had video conferencing technology deployed. That inversion is happening as we speak, as in every room, nearly every room, up to 85% over the next 12 to 18 months is going to and has to have video conferencing technology enabled. And the reason being is because that's going to be the only way to properly work as a group and properly collaborate. Is that, yes, you may come to the office to work in a group and collaborate in that meeting room, but you're still going to have to bring in those remote participants. And that's the key thing here. That's actually going to be where this pandemic has had a positive impact on both universities and large enterprises is it's going to make people feel more open to collaborating with people much further away. We saw even in our own engineering groups, and I see this a lot in large universities too, was these group projects or these collaborations on meetings and team meetings. They were done locally, and they were only done with the people that they had in the office because of that 15% number. They didn't have the means to bring in a team member from India or a team member from Japan. But now that this inversion is happening to address the local needs of the fact that, my colleague is just working from home and I need to meet with her over video conferencing, it's also, once we become completely familiar and comfortable with it, is going to open up all of those other possibilities of working across nations. And it's going to expand our horizons from an enterprise and an educational standpoint to work across these different countries and these different areas or these different states, because we're going to feel comfortable using video conferencing technology. So yes, the health screeners at the front door, I don't see those going away. Gyms will open back up. Common areas will open back up. They will do so safely. But it's about the collaboration in the office that I see being much different, but I believe actually much better, which is going to really start to drive a lot more productivity and efficiency when we do make that return. And the last two, I'm going to say that I believe are long-standing trends here, is that hybrid and work from anywhere mentality. It's kind of what we're addressing today, obviously on a larger scale of people working from home. But that hybrid environment is going to be around for a long time. People are going to feel comfortable working from anywhere. It's not just work from home, but it is work from the coffee shop, and it is work from a different office that maybe you're traveling next to. And that hybrid environment, meaning that I can, as a team leader or as part of a team, interact efficiently and productively with my team that maybe is in the office because I have the technology, because I have the video conferencing familiarity to do so. And so those two trends I see being big, but of course I actually do see a positive impact overall that this pandemic is going to take on really overall collaboration.
What a inspirational vision there and a beautiful moment to end on. But before I do let you go, could I ask that you remind everyone listening where they can find you online, and also the work that you're doing at Crestron there, and even contacting your team if they've got any questions. What's the best way of doing that?
Absolutely. So I'd say the first best way to contact myself is just through my email address. You guys can all reach me at agross@crestron.com. I love being active on social media. LinkedIn is my go-to. If you'd love to read any of my articles or blogs about my vision of the future of work or the vision of the future of the classroom, you can find me on linkedin.com/in/Andrew P. Gross. So just my full name there. And then, of course, really all the stuff kind of we talked about today, Neil, all this technology to support this return to the office or return to the classroom can all be found on crestron.com/Flex, Flex, which is our video conferencing equipment to help people collaborate better together.
Excellent. Well, I'll add the link to the articles that you write on LinkedIn and to the Flex area, the Crestron site as well, so people can find that nice and easily. But thanks so much for coming on today, and not only talking about the work that you're doing at Crestron, but delving a little bit deeper into the type of technologies that will help support a safe yet collaborative return to offices following the pandemic. Because I know I've had a lot of people asking me the similar questions to what they're coming to you with there. So I think it's so important that we have discussions like this. But a big thank you for you taking the time to share that with me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. It was a pleasure to be part of it.
Wow, where do I begin? Occupancy sensors with a method to make sure new capacity limits aren't exceeded in meeting rooms. Automated meeting start technology that forgoes the need to touch AV equipment. And of course, the ability to control meetings and share presentations and content from a personal device. No need to touch a shared conference room equipment. And just those few things that I've mentioned there show you how much our outlook has changed in, 6 months? And there's some pretty cool tech right there. But over to you. I mean, what are your thoughts about everything that we discussed today? And how do you see the future of work? And how is your office adapting and evolving with these changes? As always, please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My social channels, whether it be Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, is just at Neil C. Hughes. And my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. So please send over your thoughts from the moment you leave the house in the morning. If you're getting on a metro, if you're going up an escalator, if you're going in a meeting room, are you conscious about everything that you touch, or are you concerned about becoming a bit of a germaphobe, or is it just common sense? Whatever it is, I want to hear all sides of this argument. So keep those messages coming in, and I'll return tomorrow with another guest where we'll explore another topic. But before I go, just want to say a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.